We're going to go ahead and get started. First off, I need to motion to approve the December 15th minutes. Do I hear a motion? Senator Tyson, and second by Senator Peterson. All those in favor say aye. All right. All those opposed, motion carries. Those are approved. Okay, so my intention for today's meeting was to look at the proposed legislation. We really need to get this out so that we can get it started. We're going to start it in the House. Appropriations was going to hear it, I think, is what we've kind of just looked at. So I think I will go ahead and have, so Natalie is now our reviser. Mr. Scott left. And so she's now a reviser, and so I'm going to have her go over what we did. The changes are basically what we talked about at the last meeting. We have had a little bit of back and forth with the department on a couple of things, but in looking at them, I didn't have a problem. A lot of it was just adding actually added some good things, some reporting to some committees and things like that. So, and as we get into it, as we get into the legislation in our regular committees, there may be some changes. But Natalie, if you want to go ahead and go through it, and then we'll proceed from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Natalie Scott from the Office of Reviser of Statutes. Kind of jumping into this a little bit cold because I wasn't as familiar with it when Matt was working on it, but I'm going to walk you through the changes that were made based off the previous draft to what you have in front of you now. So the first change on page 3 in subsection E2, we added that language at the end to provide for a change that's more than 10% of that projected timeline or a change that's significant as determined by ITEC policies. So that was added in there. On page 5, in paragraph 3 there, it'd be subsection B3. That language now says that are reportable, and that was changed throughout the draft. It used to say projects that have been reviewed, but now they're required to be reportable under KSA 75-7209. That same change on page 7 in paragraph 3, and then on page 8 in subsection C there. And then if you go to page 10, this starts one of the bigger changes starting in paragraph A. The documentation that's required to be provided would be a financial plan showing that source of funding. And then that report would also have to be consistent with the ITEC policies. And then starting paragraph 2, that was in your old draft, the projects with the significant business risk as determined by those ITEC policies. And then on page 11, subsection B, little I there has changed. Now that it used to reference the head of the state agency. Now it references the CETO of the branch that's appropriate. So if it's an executive branch agency or if it's a legislative branch agency, it'd be the legislative CETO. And then later on down in there, you'll see that's where we added the language that you guys talked about. If 2 or more members of the joint committee request that a meeting happen, and then they notify legislative research, and then legislative research will notify the chairperson, who then has to have that meeting take place. So that's where that language was added. And then down in 2 little I's, we have a definition for what advised and consulted with means. So they'll be considered to have advised and consulted in accordance with the statute if fewer than 2 members of the joint committee request that day and then the 7 days passes, or if the committee meeting is requested and then you actually have that committee meeting to advise and consult. And then over on page 14, we changed the agency head to the CTO of the branch of government where that agency is in subsection A there. And then the next changes are over on page 21. So in paragraph 8A there, the old draft had that cybersecurity self-assessment report going to the joint committees, this joint committee and the Joint Committee on Kansas Security. Now it's just going to the CISO, but then you guys are going to get a report a little bit later on. If you look on page 23, we have a new subsection C1. So the CISO, in collaboration with this committee and the Joint Committee on Kansas Security, will develop a self-assessment report for those agencies to use when they're making that cybersecurity assessment. And then the CISO will aggregate the data from those assessments, and they'll present that report to you and to the Joint Committee on Kansas Security. And then we also provide that those self-assessment reports that are made to the CISO would be confidential and not subject to KORA. And then there is another kind of technical change back on page 21, paragraph 8, subparagraph B. There was a KORA exception in there that's set to expire in 2023. I'm sure you guys are familiar. You do a bill every year where you review all the KORA exceptions that are expiring at the end of the year. So we went ahead and just removed the sunset on that KORA exception. That's a policy choice that would be up to you guys. That would also happen in that other bill. So we'll kind of track to make sure that we don't run into any conflicts there. And then on page 24, there's another KORA exception that will expire. And so we're going to leave that one alone. And actually, now I'm seeing that it'll be in 2020. Those were set to expire in 2023, not 2022. So I may actually have to back that out. But those are kind of more technical changes, not substantive to the draft. I would note that before this meeting, I did submit this to our editing department. I haven't gotten it back though, but I should only have to make technical changes, nothing substantive, but just some technical editing changes. And I can take any questions you guys might have.
All right, thank you, Natalie. One thing I did want to, and I think maybe you misunderstood me when, on page 13, subsection A, I think the department changed that to email, and I asked for it to be emailed or mailed. So if we could change that, where it says project plan summary was emailed or mailed.
Yes, sorry about that. I did miss that.
If that sounds good to everybody. Yeah. Senator Tyson, did you? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 11, I have a little bit of concern. So is the Chief Information Technology Officer going to be responsible for the bid RFP, RFQ process? Or is that still going to be handled through the Department of Administration? And the reason I ask that, Mr. Chairman, we've had problems in the past history with, and we've gone back and forth as a state. I think we need to define the direction that we want to be with our IT. But what we've had happen in the past is the departments and agencies used to handle it internally, and they found that they were letting projects to their friends, quote unquote, and we may or may not see the results that we needed as a state. So it was moved under the Department of Administration, a majority of these contracts now. And I'm just asking if we're going back to prior departments and administration agencies being able to bid their own.
I don't believe that was the intent. I think the intent was that the agency CTOs would be kind of ahead of the starting that process, but ultimately it has to go to the CTO, in administration. Am I right, Natalie? Is that still the way it is, or that was the intent anyway?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So you're not making any changes to the actual procurement part. So that would still be handled under the Department of Administration. This change is just about the information, who's going to be responsible for providing that information. So now it's going to be the CTO instead of the head of the agency. So for example, if the revisor's office was going to do some kind of project, Alan would be kind of preparing that information instead of Gordon.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would like to see us clarify in the process that, and maybe it's in here, but I would like to see this committee have some overview or input to the process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I guess I'm not sure exactly what, because that should be the way, that should be what we're doing.
And I do think that part of that comes in over on page 12, where you guys added in that ability to, if two members of the committee want to kind of require that a meeting be called, then you would have a committee meeting to review that information.
Yeah, I believe that would be before any RFP or anything like that went out. If two members of this committee look at it and say, we want to have a meeting, then the meeting would be called for.
Okay, I guess we just need to kind of walk through the logistics of it and make sure that that's the best possible scenario for these
Okay.
contracts. I know they can be complicated and difficult for lay people because they might not understand the terminology and think that they're getting, I would like to see some people with the technical expertise look over these contracts before they're actually let. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, we would have that partly with people that are on the JCIT. You know, that, so. Any other questions? Anybody else have anything? What we've tried to do is to not slow down the process completely, but also slow down the process a little bit, you know, so that we do have some look. And you'll see that we put in there, like on page 12, like the fourth, starting in the third paragraph, or third sentence, but after receiving such plan summary, each member shall review the information and may submit questions, request additional information, or request a presentation and review the proposed project meeting or project at a meeting of the joint committee. So what we tried to do is make sure that if you just have a question about it, that you can go and ask that question to the CTO or to the, you know, whoever is the one. And then if you feel like your question's been answered, then it wouldn't go any farther. But if after asking questions and some requests, if two or more of the joint committee members say, hey, yeah, we do want a meeting, then that meeting would be asked for. So that was the intention. Yes, Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think we came to that solution as we kind of dialogued with the department, and that was kind of a way for us to be able to insert, but not slow down the process, but be able to, you know, if there was some great concern, to slow it down or to have that addressed. So yeah, I think we captured pretty well what we worked through this summer with the department and what was workable on that.
I agree. I hope so anyway. I hope, and we have gone back and forth a couple times even in the last 2 weeks or week with the department on some things, just to try to make sure. And I will say that they weren't able to be here today. They told me that I could say that they did help with it. They worked with it. But, you know, I don't know that they're totally comfortable with it. You know, they probably would rather we didn't get inserted in it, but I think they're okay with it. So, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question for Natalie. It's okay. So to Senator Tyson's point, you know, I think she's going a level deeper here, which is absolutely appropriate. Where we are in the process of reviewing the projects out of the risk-based piece, we can call on question. After it goes into an RFP process, I think and and I'm not trying to, as they say, mansplain or anything, but it seems as though after we get into that process, we're not inserted into the, after the thing is after the procurement takes over and is looking at potential responders, we're no longer inserted inside of that process, right? Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. So once that RFP goes out, then it would be just governed by the procurement statutes. Typically, you'd put together a procurement negotiating committee, and that is the group who would kind of handle the responses to the RFP.
And Ms. Chair, I'm not ready right now to get into that, but there might be a secondary step after we get into this to understand how we can make sure we're not single sourcing things that are not appropriately single sourced, and we're giving fair consideration to those that might do the state better, you know, in some fashion or form, while understanding we, as a committee, sometimes don't have as much expertise, but still being able to influence that process after that step. Maybe that's something we should consider in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, and it may even be something that we might want to consider when we start working this bill. Maybe we, you know, the modernization of the Department of Labor's website has been a good example. I mean, I've served on that PNC, which has given the legislature a little bit of a voice on that PNC. You know, whether we want to do that on everyone, maybe we do. Maybe we want to have a member of the legislature on every PNC, even if we expanded the PNC. I mean, maybe, you know, so that might be something that we do want to talk about. Because, yeah, you're right. This would give us the voice before the RFP, and then the monitoring after the RFP would be the basic. So as far as the RFP process, this doesn't, but possibly we may want to look at that. That might be something that we want to look, because, you know, I and the others on the PNC have had a lot of conversations, and it has worked pretty slick. The only thing it has done is I've had to be careful, you know, because there's things that I've learned that I can't tell, you know, with the other, like I wouldn't be able to, you know, if you were on the PNC, there would be things you wouldn't be able to tell the joint committee, you know, but that's been worked out, and, you know, so it did work, but, so, you know, maybe we do want to look at that, but I don't want to hold up this legislation anymore right now, but let's continue to have that conversation, and maybe we can add it in the Senate or the House if we do feel like it needs to be added in, so. So do we have any other questions or comments before my intention is if we pass this out, if we say, okay, yeah, we agree that we want to do this as a Joint Information Technology Committee bill, Natalie will finish it up, and then it'll be introduced automatically, from what I understand. So, yeah, Senator Peterson.
Let's still go to the House first, as we discussed in our last meeting.
That's what I would like. I've already kind of made arrangements with leadership and talked a little bit to the chairman of appropriations. I think that's where we'll take it. We've got time right now in appropriations to work on it before we get into budgets. And so I think if we can get it introduced, I think we'll try to get it done here in the next couple weeks.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. If there is no other changes or comments, I'd take a motion to, I guess, I take a motion to move this out as a joint committee bill. Senator Peterson makes that motion. Is there a second? Second by Senator Pittman. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you, guys. Well, is there any discussion? No. So it will be moved out. And so originally we had put on the calendar for leadership elections, but because we have, so many of us have to be other places, we're going to postpone that for right now, and we're going to do that at a later meeting. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, guys.